Something I love about these markers is that they're water-based, so you can have a just paintbrush with you and a little cup of water and blend out the markers to make it look more like watercolor or just to blend the two together. So another neat thing about these is that they're a dual brush. So this side is your brush tip and this side is a fine tip. So for today's project, you're going to need your water-based markers. You want an eraser, a pencil, paintbrush, and water. Oh, you also need a ruler. So we've got that too. So once you have all of your supplies gathered, you're going to want to select, a favorite quote or something you would want to write down or draw or something like that. So I picked out a quote to do today. It's one that has been really resounding with me recently, and I thought it would be fun to do a little lettering and use the markers. So we're going to start off with our pencil and ruler first. Move some of these markers out of the way. And then we are going to, I want to do my text at a diagonal. So I'm going to have my ruler here to help me out. So you want to make sure that you're just doing very faint, soft lines. And whenever you move it down, make sure that the line you just drew and your ruler are parallel. And just create however many lines you think it's going to take to write out your quote. And then I'm not so good that I can just write it out. I like to write it in pencil first, so that's what we're going to do here. And the paper I'm using, because I'm going to use some water to blend it, I'm using our mixed media watercolor journal. So it's a little thicker, paper's a little heavier, so it is still smooth enough to take the marker, but it's heavy enough that I could use some water with it. If you weren't going to dilute it down with water, you could just use any kind of drawing paper would be just fine. Let's see. Okay, so now we've got our text. So let's go ahead. I want to just show you what all of these colors look like. So we'll work our way down. And I want to play around with some gradients and some shadowing. So I think for this first part, let's do it in purple. I think that would be pretty. And then we can do some shadowing with it as well. So we could either use the brush, but I feel like with this one, I want nice fine lines. So I'm going to use the fine tip. And for me, I'm left-handed, so I work backwards whenever I'm filling in Okay, so we've got our first line done, and now we get to add some of the fun things to it. So for this one, I'm not going to blend it, but I'm going to add a shadow. So I'm going to take the dark purple. So I'm only going to put the shadow on the left-hand side of the heavy points of each letter. So you start nice and light, press down a little bit, lift up, press. All right, so there's that first part. And then for this next part, we're gonna fade it out and do a gradient with this lettering here. Let's do a peach to pink. So whenever you're fading colors together, you want to start with your lighter color first. So I'm going to start with the peach. And then if you're doing a kind of calligraphy, any downstroke you're going to press harder, and anytime you go up, you lift and press very light. So light and heavy, light and heavy, light again, and so on. On to the fun part. So now I'm going to take my hot pink and we are going to just go over the bottom of the letters. I don't want to cover the whole thing. And I'm not going to bother blending anything out right now. We're going to do that later. So you can see I'm kind of making a line. So I'm trying to stop around the same point. There we go. And then you could get crazy if you wanted to. Why not? Let's go ahead and get a little bit of the dark purple. And we're going to just add a touch to the very bottom. We don't want to do too much. And this is where using a mixed media paper, something that's heavier but still smooth, really, it just really shines because it's going to handle all of these layers really well. All right, so on to the fun part. So I've got my tiny brush and I'm going to dip it in some water. And you want it wet, but you don't want it dripping because you need to be able to really control it. So you may need to dip your brush a couple times and wipe it on the side just to remove excess water. And then again, I'm going to go from right to left because I'm left-handed, but if you're right-handed, you probably would want to go across the other way. So then you're just going to lightly brush over the marker. And it's going to pick up that pigment, so you may need to rinse your brush off. So I would say maybe let's start with our light color first and work down rather than starting with the dark color. So you very gently brush over those transitions and it just blends those markers beautifully into one another. So I'm rinsing my brush off again, starting with my light color, pulling it down. We're going to use the fine tip again for this bottom part. And I'm going to see if I can scoot it over a little bit. And then we're going to use the teal as our shadow for this one. I'm not sure that I'm happy with that color combination, but you know, that's okay. Take risks, see what happens, have fun with it. So we're going to do the gray. And I love how light it is. If you want to see what you can do with some really lovely, just very subtle transition, is if we were to just put just a hair of the teal along the bottoms here. So if you want to do just a touch of color, again, get your brush with your water. And you can pull that out and make it a really pretty blue, or you can rinse your brush again and really make it subtle and light. Just what we're going for. So I'm going to go through and just do a couple here. And then before it dries, rinse your brush, wipe it off, and then go down. And that's going to pull that color up into that wet area you just painted. Pull that water down into that teal. Now, if you were to go up, it would bring a lot more of that teal up into the gray, but I want to preserve the gray, so I'm going to pull down. There we go. I think that looks really cool. Let's do some hot pink flowers and some peach flowers. So you could sketch these out first if you wanted. So I'm going to start with my light green. Again, you always want to work with your lighter colors first and then go over with your darker colors, because it'll pick up those darker colors with your light marker if you were to do it the other way around. So always start with your light ones first. Okay, so I'm liking how that's looking. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get our brush and start blending some of this out. So you can either use your little bitty brush that you've been using, or if you have a larger brush, you could switch over to a little bit of a larger round brush, which I think for these flowers, the larger round brush would be easier. So I'm going to get it wet, and then I'm just going to brush over that marker just to soften its edges. And I love, it's just such an easy, fun way to get a watercolor effect without having all of those, I don't know, just needing to worry with the whole setup. So it's a lot easier to do this on the go. And then again, you always want to start with your outs with your lighter color and then pull in towards your darker color. That way you don't lose that light color. So again, just keep your brush wet. Depending on how much you want it to bleed and blend, will depend on how much water you put on your brush. If you want to, you can pull some of the other color and touch it in. I love how you can get a very similar effect without needing to worry with the whole setup of water and whatnot. Though I have to say watercolor is not terribly difficult to set up, but it is hard to do on an airplane. And I've done that too, which was fun, but it definitely garners a lot more attention. So there's that. And then I think these letters at the top, I have a feeling they're dry now, so we're going to take our eraser and just be mindful of your markers, of the flowers, because they're still wet and we don't want it to smear. So you're going to go through and erase those pencil lines. One of the test runs that I didn't let the marker set long enough, and it wasn't dry all the way, and it smeared. So that is something you would want to be aware of. And there you have it. Some of the fun things you can do with the Tombow dual brush pens that we have in the shop. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and that it sparked some inspiration for you.